I should know that.
Oh, Wade left already.
I'd like to call to order the October 12, 2017 meeting of the Council's Strategic Planning Committee. Roll call, Madam Secretary. Let the record show that all members of this committee are present. We'll ask everyone to please rise for the invocation and pledge allegiance. Tonight we have the privilege of Councilman John Cagnolotti leading us in prayer.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, we ask your blessings on this gathering tonight. Lead us and guide us to make the decisions in the best interest of the citizens of Ascension Parish. Bless those who defend our freedom in the military, that serve here and abroad. The ones serving abroad, please bring them home safe and whole. We ask that you bless our police, firefighters, and first responders. Protect our safety on a day-to-day basis. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item number 3 is the public comment period. Anyone wishing to address this committee this evening on any one of the 3 items on our agenda, please fill out either a red or a green speaker's card and bring it directly up here to the chair's desk, and you will be given your 3 minutes at that time. Item number 4 is the approval of the September 14th Strategic Planning Committee meetings. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Cagnolotti. Not sure who got under the gun, but Aaron Lawler, second. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion carries. Number 5 is the Louisiana Administrative Code enforcement. This item relates to garbage pickup. We have Ms. Carolyn Bombell, Michael Vidrine from the Louisiana Department of Health that are going to address us this afternoon. Can we have you come up to the microphone, ma'am? And while she's doing that, just a piece of quick background. How did this get on our agenda, gentlemen? I was approached by Councilwoman Terry Casso, who's having a particular problem with a garbage issue in her district. That led to her discussing the same with our parish president. And then Mr. Matassa contacted me and said that what we really need to do is hear from the Department of Health on this issue, because apparently our parish does not have ordinances that require our citizens to use a private vendor to collect their garbage, and as a result it makes things difficult on you guys, but we'll see what you have to say. Welcome this evening, and please proceed.
Thank you. Carolyn Bombett, Louisiana Department of Health. I'm Chief of Field Operations, and we have
Chantel Jones, I'm the parish manager.
And what we do is we are the sanitarians that conduct the local restaurant, nursing home, hospital, daycare. We do on-site wastewater. We do private premise complaints as well. And I think that President Matassa just basically wanted us to speak on what we are finding as a state office with regard to garbage pickup. So pretty much over the course of a year, we get approximately 60 complaints on people not picking up their garbage or not having paying for garbage pickup. And, and we did have a little bit of an influx or increase right after the floods, because obviously people were doing that cleanup after the flood, post-flood. But in large part, what we're finding is that your constituents are responding to neighbors who should have garbage pickup and who just basically are ignoring having their garbage picked up. So they're piling their garbage up very high. We have photos available, and we have documentation of mounds and mounds of trash not being picked up. And it gets to the point where it's affecting whole neighborhoods, whole trailer parks. And so what we do when we receive these complaints, some of them we can forward on to the parish office for follow-up, but some of them, when the parish has no ordinance, so it goes to the maximum that it can go of, you need to clean this up. And when it gets to that phase where it can't go anymore, it then comes over to our office. And with our office, we have several phases that we go through for compliance order. We go out, we issue a notice of violation if evidence is found that they are not cleaning up their trash and it's causing a nuisance to their neighbors. Once we issue that notice of violation, We give them a certain period of time to clean it up based on the amount of trash, debris, et cetera, and the problem that it's causing. Following that, we go back for a reinspection. When we reinspect them, if they've cleaned it up, fine, they're good. If they haven't, they receive a compliance conference notice where they have to come in and meet with Chantel and her regional director. And this is the same statewide. Most parishes have an ordinance where they are required to pick up their trash, and it's connected to something, an approval like electrical or something like that, where they can hold it over them. But if they don't have an ordinance, then we go through compliance order phase, and it becomes rather lengthy. And during this time, we're seeing that the neighbors are complaining and getting very upset. It can be a slow and tedious process. As you know, when we do this, we're going out to someone's private home and residence. So we're very respectful to understand that we're coming into their home environment, but we have to enforce the laws. So I brought with me, and if you'd like, you can have a copy of the codes that would be cited if we were to note that they were in violation. If you'd like, I can bring these to you.
Please.
Thank you.
Those are just two of the routine violations that we're citing them for, and those are trash, garbage, refuse buildup, as well as if they have dogs and they're not cleaning up the fecal matter, and it's causing a nuisance to the neighbors. And like I said, we do have pictures of some of the very egregious violations, but on a whole, the smell and the nuisance that it causes and the public health issues, you know, as a neighbor, you would think that your neighbor would pick up and clean up their trash and just do the right thing, but we're not always finding that. We have approximately 60 complaints per year that we have to go out on and issue notices for. And that's a pretty high number of inspections. Any questions?
Yes, ma'am, and thank you so much for your presentation. It certainly was educational to me. I'm just curious, before we get into our parish specifically, which I think is of most interest to this committee, you said there are 60 complaints about garbage pickup per year. Did you mean that as a statewide figure or just in our parish?
Just in Ascension Parish.
Okay, because I would have thought it'd be a lot more statewide. So there is a problem, and probably more than just in Ms. Terry Casso's district. Now, in reviewing your steps, and then we're going to turn this over to the committee, I saw a notice of violation, time to clean up, reinspect, and then a compliance notice. And what tweaked my interest is when you said most parishes have ordinances where trash pickup is mandated. Am I understand correctly from both Ms. Casso and Mr. Matassa that we do not in Ascension Parish?
There is no parish ordinance that I know of that exists, so I would go with what President Matassa said.
I don't know one either, but maybe
Okay.
some of these gentlemen up here do. But so is it also true, Mr. Matassa and Ms. Casso indicated to me in asking to put this on strategic planning agenda, that if we had one, it would make your job easier? And if that's so, would you explain exactly how in terms of maybe these two Title 51 Public Health Sanitary Code ordinances?
I would have to say it would depend on how the ordinance was written.
Okay.
Certainly, a lot of the ordinances are written to where when you've exhausted all of the power or controls that you write into that ordinance, that it still would come over to our office to enforce as a state agency.
Mm-hmm.
So that certainly is always an option, that we still continue on the path that we're doing and continue this process. We're going to continue to serve the public as a state government entity that's stationed here in Ascension Parish. But with an ordinance, it might make it a lot easier, or we might have a reduced amount of them, but they would still have to go through that same process.
Okay.
It depends on how
I understand
strong
that.
the ordinance
And of course,
is.
we can get examples of other parishes through legal counsel and elsewhere
Yeah.
to come in front of this committee. We don't necessarily have to have an action tonight to the full council, but it sounds like you're recommending that we do it, maybe do something, depending on how it's worded, that would help you be able to do your job better as well. Because without an ordinance, I'm going to operate tonight on the assumption that both Ms. Casso and Mr. Matassa are correct we don't have an ordinance. I don't know that we could do. I mean, she was giving me specifics, actually. I don't want to put names in the record or anything of one. And it was exactly what you said in your opening remarks. The complaints usually correspond to the neighbor's abuse,
Yeah.
where a neighbor's pointing the finger and saying, look, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. And they call the parish, and the parish is saying, we can't do nothing about it. And then you guys get involved and say, well, we can, provided that you have or do not, whatever. But I'm going to turn this over to committee and see what specific questions they have and see what might be our best path forward. I think last time I started on this end with OJ, so we'll go all the way down to Councilman Benny Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess what I want to find out, for 60 complaints, you said that's a lot compared, for this area with the population we have. How does that compare to other parishes on a per capita basis?
I can't give you that number because with most parishes in the region that I have worked have the ordinance where they're required to have garbage pickup.
So what does the
It's
ordinance
mandated.
do?
Most of the ordinances, sometimes it can be tied to something like electrical approval, just as your sewage ordinance is here locally. Other ordinances will issue a fine or a fee if they don't have garbage pickup on top of that. I can't tell you, as Councilman Satterly said, I would consult with legal and see how you would want it written. But it depends on how it's written. We do have other complaints that come to us from other governmental agencies, like parishes when they max it out. But in most cases, most parishes, private premises, we don't get involved unless it's out in the parish, not in the city limits.
Right. And that's what we're concerned with, is within the parish. I'm kind of frustrated with some of this in the sense that, and I want to make sure I'm right with it, is basically what you're saying is an ordinance takes the ball out of y'all court and puts it in ours. And so y'all don't have to deal with it. Is that
Well-
true, or correct assessment?
Well, yeah, that would be correct, but I need to stress that I was asked to come to discuss this with you at the urging of the president. It wasn't us coming to ask for a reduction in the number of inspections.
Right.
It was the president bringing up the issue with me that this is a problem we're having in the parish, that they get multiple complaints, and then it comes over to us, and we utilize our processes for compliance orders. And it does get slow and tedious because you have to give them the allotted amount of time as mandated by law.
Right.
And so today, I'm here only to present our experience with it, not to ask that you put an ordinance in place.
Okay.
Of course, that would be great. For me, as a citizen of Louisiana, as a public health proponent, I would say that I would appreciate having an ordinance because of the complaints of the neighbors. And when we take a complaint, it's a neighbor who's right next door to someone else. And so we only take it if it's directly affecting you. So I've had dumpster loads of trash right up on the back of somebody's house.
Right.
And it's very disconcerting for them to see.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a problem. I've had a few issues in my area as well. It's trying not to pass the buck, I guess, is the biggest thing with it. And I mean, we've got state ordinances or state laws that can be enforced.
Yes.
It would depend on what our ordinance would say and how it would be placed to the public as to whether or not it would be effective, like you were talking about before. And right now, my concern with it is that we don't have a code enforcement officer. The stuff we've tried to do as far as code enforcement officers, unfortunately, we've been failing. So if we put another ordinance on the book and we don't have a way to enforce it, the ordinance is useless and you just soon not do it.
Yeah.
Because it's just it's one of those things, to me, it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. If you got an ordinance, enforce the ordinance.
Yeah.
And if we don't have the ability for whatever reason to maintain our code enforcement and so forth and so on, which is not the state's problem, it's our own problem, then as much as I would like to do it, I don't see the justification to do it. So, thank you, ladies. I appreciate y'all being here tonight, and I'm gonna see how the rest of the conversation goes from here.
Thank you, Councilman Johnson. A follow-up to Benny's question before we hear from the next committee member. So this 60 complaints we now know is an AP, but it could be, I think if I heard you correctly, higher than that, because that's just what gets up to your level.
That's
We
correct.
could be having that number or even more or less
Yes.
just here locally that, you know, so
We,
it's it's a problem.
Yeah, I would say problem, and that's simply why I'm here. We
Right.
can keep things as they are.
And-
We
and
will
I
most
appreciate- yeah.
definitely serve the parish.
Yes.
And are willing to do so. We have the laws in place. We do have success because we had 43 closed cases
Right.
just since February alone. We've
Right.
had 43 closed cases, and that's not counting the sewage, that's
Right.
just trash.
Right.
And so it's working. It's working slowly, but it is a problem.
Well,
And so that's why the president had me come today, just
Right,
to
and
let
and
you
I have an
know.
appreciation for the fact that you guys didn't come to us to reduce your workload. We came to you, so we want that to be clear. With that, we'll hear from Mr. John Cagnolotti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your experience, you said you had 43 cases that were closed
Yes, sir.
of the 60?
Yes.
In your experience, have you ever had one, not necessarily just in Ascension Parish, where they just failed to comply? Were they cited? What were the fines and that sort of thing? Can you
Okay.
share that?
We have had no cases where it's gone to a compliance order phase, where it enters and goes before an administrative law judge for fines or penalties. We do work with these people. You know, like I said, when we go out, we have these laws in place, and we have to follow the compliance order steps, and we have to do them within the time frame that's mandated. But when you're dealing with post-storm, this was about, my numbers start from February of this year. When you're dealing with post-storm and people were doing that cleanup, we did work with them in those instances when they were affected by the flood. We thought that it would show good faith to work with them on allotting them a little additional time. And in most cases, they were very appreciative of that, and most people wanted to clean up their mess. It was only those that got to the point where we had to call them in on part of that compliance process, which is a compliance conference. And those are the times when you had Chantel there, and you had her regional director there, Ms. Terrio, and you had me come in from Baton Rouge as chief of field operations to get to these people and discuss with them the importance of getting this picked up, how it affects the public, and how you're going to get fined if we have to go to the next phase. And usually that's the kicker. Usually that's what gets them to correct the violation.
The only other question I had is, you said following the storm, we became the debris capital of the world. Us, East Baton Rouge and Livingston, a couple other parishes. And there had to, I'm sure, be some leniency granted, but working with them. But from a health perspective, you're talking about food waste, any number of other items that just accumulate. And it's a threat to our health, whether it's a neighbor or an entire area. Has it gotten so severe that you had to take action? You said no, right? You said of the 60,
Correct. No compliance
nothing went
orders.
with any cites, the one being cited and no fines.
No fines, but they were given notice of violations.
Okay. But then they corrected it?
Correct.
That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
y'all
Cag.
for coming. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Mr.
that.
Cagnolotti. So now we know that 43 cases of the 60 were in Ascension Parish resolved. That simple math, 17, are there open files out there? And how will we ever get resolution? Are people just mad now and because we don't have an ordinance and the state can't do anything because they don't have anything beyond 51, 101, and 109? Which, by the way, I read parts A, B, C, and D. I had a chance while John was talking. And it talks about you shall not do this, you shall not do that, you shall not do this. But it doesn't say what happens if you continue to do it.
And you're reading in the, what I just gave you?
I'm reading in Part 27, Chapter 1, Refuse Management, 103, Accumulation and Collection of Refuse. 109 deals,
Yes.
for the record, and everybody that can't see this at home, specifically in stable refuse, which is, I don't know, maybe not a problem, maybe it's some of the problem, but just for regular garbage, it seems to me it's captured in 103.
Yes, we've had a few of those because of dogs, et cetera.
Right.
But I apologize, I did not include Chapter 1, which is our enforcement code.
Oh,
So
okay.
that is where we can cite all of these violations.
And
It has its
what is
own
the state
code.
penalty?
The state penalty, it's fines and fees based on the category of the violation. So if it's a A violation, it's $100, 50, 30. It's per day that you are in violation after the administrative law judge.
So the worse it is, it's probably a sliding
The
scale.
max is
It-
10,000.
It escalates, and it's a daily fine until you fix it.
Yes. And the max is 10,000.
Okay?
Most of the time when working with public, you know, like I said, you can get them to correct it before we get to that point.
Thank you very much.
And of the 43, you had asked about the,
Of the 17, yeah.
you had asked about the other ones. Those are, we did meet with President Matassa, and this was during the time period when I brought him over to meet his new parish manager. He asked about the complaints that they were continually receiving and whether or not we had any idea of how we could affect a change. And one of the things was to have somebody within his office do an initial consultation or follow-up or investigation of the complaint. And then once they give us some evidence, they would send it over to our office.
Gotcha.
And so those 15 have been routed from our office. We've recorded them as a call and a complaint. They've been routed to the parish, and then they'll be routed back if they don't get them to comply.
Okay. Mr. Lawler.
Yeah, thank y'all for coming. I have a couple of questions and kind of jump around. Other people have asked some great questions already. Open to resolution. So when you first get the call until resolution, how long do these generally take? I know there will be outliers.
I would say we give them a 2-week time period on the first notice of violation, if that helps you, and most will comply. We do have some that were, you know, it was a very egregious situation, and they took upwards of a month. But this was a particular instance where we were at a trailer park, and the garbage was mounded from me to you as tall as I am. And so it took them a while to get it all removed. But I think that lasted probably a month and a week or something along those lines.
Just perplexing to me when you say
And
that.
that wasn't due to a flood.
Yeah,
They
that's
weren't
just
flooded.
shocking. What would they just not having garbage pick up? They're just throwing it outside? I don't understand how that happens.
It would be categorized as an outlier, like
Okay.
you said, because of the person who lived in the trailer was in jail, and he had a squatter living in there, and they were just dumping out their garbage. So we had to go through some channels to try to issue the notice of violation, because the only person who was available was his teenage daughter, who was in high school, at the local high school, and I certainly wasn't going to serve her with
No.
papers. So we, of course, went through roundabout and got the information over to him, found him as his workplace, and we were able to issue it there.
Okay. Wow. That's sad to hear also. It's a hard thing. This, I'm looking at it, it seems to be garbage and refuse. This wouldn't apply to white goods, is that correct?
White goods? I'm
Like
sorry.
washers, dryers, that sort of thing?
No, unless, if it's not elevated up off the ground and there's a mass amount and it's serving as rodent harborage, we could apply this.
Okay, wow. The other question, we kind of touched on this already. Obviously, other parishes do this. Is the majority of the parishes or that do this that have an ordinance, or do most not have an ordinance?
I can only speak for Region 1 or the Capital Region, and all of the other parishes, as I know, have a formal ordinance. Whether or not it's a written, formal, documented ordinance, or they just have a process that they're following to make people get trash pickup, I might be mistaken. It doesn't come to us in the form of they have piled up trash.
Okay. My other question kind of ties into that. You have more experience in these ordinances or even informal ordinances. Are there any parishes that you find have better ordinances than others that we may look to for guidance?
I can't answer that,
Good
but I
question.
would very much like to provide information on that. I should have gotten a number in even this Capital Region too, and copies of their ordinances for you in preparation for today.
I'm just curious.
I'd
We
be
can get
happy
that.
to supply that to you.
Thank you. Good presentation.
Yep. So that's exactly, very good questions by my colleague, Mr. Law here, brings up the idea that, and I don't know where this is headed, frankly, we're going to see in a minute, that through legal we can get that, but if you're willing to work with us in that regard, that would be greatly appreciated, because not only save the legwork, but even behind the scenes, if you want to put a bug into Mr. Parrington's ear, that's our legal counsel, whatever, that, I really like this because this one helps me do my job. That's the way it was originally presented to me. I am curious, now that we down to the 17 open files, without names, is one of them the issue in Ms. Castle's district? Is it still an open file issue?
I wouldn't know that.
What's her district?
That would be 8.
And do you know, like a main street around there?
No, we're not going to go there. I just,
I
she
can't-
tells me this is like a daily thing in her life, and it's
It's in
really,
Perryville.
really, really
That's all I
bad.
can say. I guess
I
it's Perryville or
honestly,
Dutchtown area.
It's Prairieville and Dutchtown, and
Yeah.
I don't know exactly where. I do, but
No, it's not in that area.
okay. All right, because we want to, not that we would just do a lot for one councilman or whatever, but that's how it started. I'm kind of like Aaron. I'm just surprised at much. I guess I'm really naive. This even goes on. I'm reading your law again in here. It talks about as long as it's in containers. Now I'm beginning to think, well, suppose you got 30 garbage cans out there and it's all still containerized. Is it still okay, or it's kind of weird? But we've saved the best to last. Councilman Oliver Joseph.
No, for me, all the questions been answered, except, I go through this here yearly. I get the complaints. If it's not garbage, it's high grass. And then, once again, it's a rural area, and when it all boiled down to it, it goes back to the state, because the grass is too tall, and then there's a rodent problem, and it's a health requirement, it is right next door neighbor, garbage, either one. So, we definitely have to put something on the books to help, ourselves and to help you. So, I'm looking forward to try to get some document to go forward on this.
Okay, so I don't know if,
Mr.
gentlemen, we
Chairman.
need a second round? Okay.
Got a couple
Councilman,
other questions.
Councilman
Yes.
Johnson.
So how many parishes that, of course, what you're saying, we're the only ones, how many of those other parishes have an ordinance that say you have to have a garbage service versus how many of those parishes that have some kind of fee or tax that provide garbage service?
I can't answer that question, but I can certainly, like I told Councilman Satterly, I can definitely find that information out for you, and I can send it to you.
Okay.
And I can do that pretty quickly.
And it sounds like it's, some comments have been made by other folks that nothing can be done by you guys, and that's not the case. It's just the process is long, and so it's frustrating. So to say that nothing can be done is not correct. And so the other question, comes into it, and I'm glad to hear that, you work with people, you try to get them to do the right thing on their own before you bring the hammer out. And I'm glad to hear that. And sometimes it drags on if they start kind of cleaning up, and it just, we've had that here a couple times with folks. You give them every opportunity, they start kind of cleaning up and they run into issues, and things drag out a little bit longer than what you would think it would take. But when you're working with people, that's the kind of things that happen. So, yeah, I would like to see that information that you've talked
Definitely
about.
get that for you.
And if you could get that to the administration, I'm sure they can get it to us. So you're not dealing with 11 different people, you just get that to one spot, and we can use that to decide what direction we need to go in. Yeah, Council Secretary, Ms. Gaucher would be the right person for another, yeah.
Okay.
Would be another person that you could send that to. But thanks again.
Anyone else?
No,
Okay, before we dispense with the item, gentlemen, I'm just going to ask you what your pleasure is. Obviously, there are multiple options. We can refer this back to this committee after we get this information. We can direct legal counsel to start working in tandem with you guys to develop language if we feel strong enough now that we are agreeing that we might want to eventually make that recommendation to the full council. Please understand, ladies, that we cannot just do this as a committee, but we can recommend to the full council that they do it. But before doing that, obviously, we would have to have all the language and everything legally spelled out, and whoever we model it after or don't or whatever. So, gentlemen, what is your pleasure this evening?
I don't know that we need to take any action. I mean, once we get this information back, we can look at it, and then at that point in time, decipher it and bring it up then. you know,
Right.
add it to the agenda, come back
Yeah,
if we need
just
to.
bring it back here.
Okay, is that okay to you? Okay, so it sounds like we're going to bring this back to this committee to get this information, and we do meet once, for your information, a month. It's always the, what, gentlemen, Thursday in between the first and third Thursday of the month, so I guess that's the second Thursday of the month. Clock ticking as of today, so if you need any help from me, be glad to facilitate that. If not, Councilman Johnson said talk to our secretaries. That would be Cinnamon McKay or Jessica Marcotte, and O'Neill Parenting, all on ascensionparish.net. Contact
Okay.
information is our legal counsel.
Yes.
Okay?
Will do. I'll get that to you guys
Thank you.
soon.
Thank you.
And again, thank you guys so much for coming this
Thank
evening.
you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Item number 6 on our agenda, moving right along, is a discussion of solid waste collection. Whoop, garbage again. In ACUD number 1, this was requested by Councilman Oliver Joseph. Oliver?
Yes, this is up for discussion based on, I talked to our legal department, Mr. O'Neill, and he had drafted up originally, a couple of years ago, a parish-wide garbage on the east side, and I looked at it, and since we have all the customers on a water system that the parish own, and outside the city limits, we have only contracted out, I would like to give it that every resident have garbage collection based on the water bill, and bill it through that process. And Mr. O'Neill was just telling me we can do that, but he has some issue with the language he had in the original one, and he's doing some research on it. And he's going to give me that information back on it, but I just wanted to at least bring y'all up to date that I'm looking at doing this in ACUD District 1, just because the same reason the ladies just left here. I have those complaints too. We have approximate, outside the city limits, close to about 1,200 residents. And I get that asked often, you know, why we do not have garbage pickup, you know, for everyone. And this way here, we would have a device to base it, have a choice to cut off their water if they does not pay it, because it's all on one bill. And that's what I'm looking for, and I'd like to bring this item back to strategic planning once
Okay.
we get the language.
Okay.
They got to go through the,
Okay, OJ, so if I heard you correctly, you want to bring it back after O'Neill, OJ O'Neill. O'Neill works on it a little further with you. It also sounds like it's dangerously close, and I mean that in a positive way to what we just learned. So if you still want it as a separate issue, we can do that, or kind of combine the two, or I don't know whether you're going to be a proponent of tying it to electricity. We did hear that as one option, as well as fines at the local level and so forth, so I don't know how this thing is going to morph out.
I prefer this to be separate
All right.
because.
No, we'll leave it that way. I
yeah.
mean, there is a Mississippi River that separates the east and west bank, and I'm aware of
Well,
it.
I mean, just the difference is they have a water system that they
Right.
have a billing process.
That's true, too.
And the
Yeah.
parish own it.
Yeah, we do have water over there, as, you know, the observation that we don't have on the East Bank, so. Everybody happy with bringing this back next time?
I would like to ask my councilman a favor, if possible. If you would, and I understand what you're trying to accomplish, can we see, I would much rather solve this on a parish-wide basis. I think there is an issue, but I would much rather solve it on a parish-wide basis as opposed to separating East and West Bank. And I understand where you're going, and I mean, if something doesn't happen from the full council on the entire parish, then,
There
you
you
know,
go, it's the risk you take.
Okay, okay. We talking about parish-wide garbage pickup or,
well, whatever comes out of this, let's see where we're gonna go is what I'm asking. Let's see where we go with the prior topic on a
That's what
parish-wide basis.
oh, that's,
Whether it's,
Yeah.
whether, whatever it turns out to be, and then if that's not satisfactory to what you're trying to accomplish, then, you know, go the route you're talking about.
I'm
if
good with
that's-
that.
if that's okay.
That's good to have this
Yeah,
this
just a
conversation
discussion,
on.
that's right.
Yeah. So no, and I just was trying to make.
Because it
people
may
aware.
solve your problem ahead of time without having to do worried about ACU D1. You know what I'm saying? That's just a thought in my mind.
So OJ, if I bring it back as essentially like item 5, and as OJ,
It's just that we'll just be
as-
open to discussion for.
as Benny's saying, with
Yeah.
parish-wide,
It'd be contracted and
then you
parish-wide
can
different.
also,
That's
discuss
all.
independent needs if it doesn't morph the way you think
Right.
it's gonna be appropriate or best for the
Yeah,
West
that's
Bank.
fine.
Rather than have 2 items, we'll just bring it back then.
As one, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Cagnalotti, you okay? Okay. Looks like everybody's okay with that. So once again, we will not have an action on 6 like 5, but we will bring it back combined with further information from O'Neill Parrington, working with an eye toward both the East and West Bank and the fact that we have water on one side and not the other that this ordinance might could be tied to or not, or whatever. And we'll see. Is that right? Okay, sounds good.
Close enough.
Before we adjourn tonight, we have one more item. Hopefully, this one won't take very long, and we can be about our merry way. Item number 7 is a Unified Land Development Code, Section 172060C. I originally placed this on last time, so this is our second bite at the apple, and had the title Finality of Contract Agreements. I need to inform the committee that since then, the finality pretty much comes as a misnomer now. It might be better replaced with the word elimination. Former Director Ricky Compton, having viewed said meeting, our last meeting, contacted me almost immediately and said that he and zoning official Lance Brock, before Ricky's tenure with the parish ran out, had for years, quote unquote, been thinking about getting rid of contract agreements because they were no longer needed. They were obsolete. With that, I turned to O'Neill Parrington, legal counsel, took a look at it. He informed me, and I think you guys were copied on all these emails, that he worked with the zoning official, Mr. Brock, and came up with what is in your packet, a suggested way to alter this section of the Land Development Code to essentially eliminate contract agreements because they're not needed. The argument, if you haven't been following this or paying attention, is that contract agreements were apparently put in so that we would have a requirement in commercial development of looking at traffic impact as well as drainage impact studies and so forth, but that's being done anyway, and therefore it is redundant and at least in the opinion of the experts, not needed. So we'll open it up to discussion, and this time we'll go, since we went left to right, we'll go right to left and see what is your pleasure. Mr. Joseph.
So, Doc, if I'm just to clarify, planning and zoning is already moving forward to give us some language on this, correct?
Not on contract agreements, no. They're on transportation in Mr. Lawler's committee now, impact studies, and in drainage are brought before us. And what happened there, I was told that when we hired, help me, the engineering firm that's doing drainage, floodplain management, that within the scope of that, they're going to advise us also on drainage impact and alteration of our ordinances. This is a separate issue. What started it with me was the fact that, contract agreements don't really change the zoning of property. They allow the zoning to be incorrect for what a commercial development wants, but on the other hand, says you can do that land use that's not allowed because you have a contract. And what had happened, like one example in my district, was Crawfish Aquatics came forward. They went through the channel of trying to rezoning. When that was turned down by the Planning and Zoning Commission and then came in front of the council, one of the flies in the ointments there was for us to agree or disagree. We agreed with the P&Z in a 10-1 vote or 11-1, whatever, or 11-0 actually. And then they turned around and went with a contract agreement. Now that stops at the level of the Planning and Zoning Commission, doesn't come back to us.
I understand that, Doc.
And so, as a result, something that was turned down by 2 different deliberative bodies wound up being approved. So that's why I was talking about finality. Now I'm learning, hey, Doc, don't even worry about finality. We don't need it, period.
Well, that's the question, I guess.
I don't want to speak out of turn, but I
Well,
think
you try to go.
well, I don't, I mean,
Well,
if you
wait,
could,
wait,
if you
let-
could
let me
bring a
control
proposed
the meeting.
change to the ordinance to us and see what you're proposing with that, I mean.
It is, it's in your packet.
Okay, I don't have one.
If I may,
It's on Novus as well. All the proposed changes that Mr. Parrington and Mr. Brock are suggesting, and these aren't mine.
Where
I
is
saw them
that,
the same
Doc?
time you did.
it,
Hang on. Let's try to do this in order.
When is that language you talking about?
I'm looking at it on my screen, so
Well,
I
all
know you
right,
got
I'm
the same
sorry,
I got.
Doc, I don't,
And it's in here. Here's O'Neill's letter. Do you see it right here? It's dated
no, I don't have that, Doc.
October 2nd, 2017 to 3:27
I
in
got
the
the
afternoon.
email, I remember the email, that's
Okay.
the email.
And
you
your
talking
name,
about.
Oliver, and everybody else's is on
Yeah,
it.
I got that.
And he's
Okay.
giving you the reasons that I just gave you essentially in probably a lot better
So
language.
basically, all you're doing is looking for a motion that we go forward, moving forward.
That we recommend to
To get
the
it
full
out.
council that we
All
accept
right.
legal opinion and Lance Brock's opinion that
Okay.
we should
All
eliminate
right.
the contract agreements as per what's in your packet.
I'm good with that, okay.
I believe now it's your turn, Mr. Lawler.
Okay, yeah, first of all, I agree with this. The basis for the contract agreements originally were any requirements for drainage and traffic impact studies to be done on commercial developments. So we were going to require that if you want to build commercially, you have to enter a contract with us, and that part of that contract is you would do the drainage impact studies, traffic impact studies. That it's redundant now because we already require any development to do
Thank
the
you.
traffic impact and drainage studies. So all we're doing is saying that instead of having a contract agreement, yeah, we're gonna clean this up. So I'm gonna make a motion that we move this item to the full council as written by our legal counsel.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilman Lawler and second by Councilman Cagnolati that we send this to the full council for their further consideration with a recommendation that we follow the changes in our land development code that have been identified and are in your packet by legal counsel O'Neill Parrington and zoning official Lance Brock. I get it right?
Perfect.
Okay, any discussion? Mr. Cagnolati, I believe it's your turn. Mr. Johnson?
Good.
Do we need a second round, OJ? Okay, so it's been moved and second that we do, and I won't repeat what I just said, what we intend to do. Is there no further discussion? Is there any objection? Hearing none, that motion carries. Gentlemen, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved, Mr.
Second.
Chairman.
Been moved and second by Mr. Lawler and Mr. Cagnolati respectively adjourned. We are adjourned.
Deal.